Welcome back to Rowing on the Square, where we bridge the gap between rehab and real performance. This is the place where rowers who aren't just looking to get cleared, but want to get back in the boat strong, confident, and moving well. Today we are joined by Jack Burns, former Great Britain international rower and founder of Edge Rowing. Jack competed at the highest levels in the single scull, but like many rowers, his path wasn't linear. Injury forced him to step back, rebuild, and rethink how he trained. What came out of that process is what he teaches now, a smarter approach that blends data, technique, and mindset so athletes can improve without breaking or sacrificing the rest of their lives. Today, Jack works with rowers around the world, helping busy athletes close the gap between where they are and where they're capable of. In this conversation, we go deep into his rehab to row journey, what he learned coming back from injury, and how that shaped how he coaches today. If you've ever been stuck between being cleared and actually feeling ready to perform, this one is for you. I'd love for you to speak about, just in general, like your background, and then get into, when you had an injury and how you got through it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Adrian. I'm excited to be here, and I think yeah, you just the space needs this, and it's such a good idea as well. I think that I'm excited to be here and to share my experience and what I found was useful for me and the highs and the lows. But yeah, well, I mean, bit of background. I used to love. Well, I always loved sports, but used to play hockey. Stopped that, and then saw rowing at the Olympics, and Helen Glover won gold in after starting the sport in 4 years previously. So thought, oh, that's cool. It's something you can pick up late and still have maybe the potential to do this professionally. So yeah, from pretty much day one of me starting the sport, I knew I wanted to try and get to the top end. So with that, you know, my first couple sessions, I just caught the bug instantly and got addicted to that feeling of improvement and became very obsessed, which is part of the problem, which you've maybe heard this one before, I'm guessing, but yeah, very quickly was said to my coach, hey, they were trying to build me in and they're like, oh, try and do 12K, 10Ks. I was like, no, get me on the program that everybody else is on. And I was, on the machine for an hour and a half, just pulling as hard as I could as well, like not doing any training in the right zones, just going full gas. I had really tight hips from playing ice hockey. Like my glutes got really tight and I couldn't for example, like I couldn't fold my leg onto my knee. I couldn't even do that. And yeah, just I think I had strong legs from playing hockey, but I had no core and no mobility. And just yeah, 9 months into the sport, I started to experience sciatica and told my coach about it. And pretty much, I wasn't a fan of this coach, but they were kind of like disappointed to hear that had happened. And they weren't looking back on it, they weren't very supportive of me like taking rest. So that was one thing I definitely did learn the hard way was that, you have to like take the lead with the injury as well. Like you have to know when to say no. And like you're saying, oh, you feel a twinge or something to like back off. So that was the first thing. And then, yeah, kind of like touch and go for a while. I was kind of going in and out of the sport, but immediately I was very, very discouraging for me because I was like, I knew the amount of work ahead of me to get into the GB team and get to the Olympics. And here I was 9 months into the sport and already had like a really bad injury of sciatica. So I had extreme doubt about whether or not, my body would be able to handle the training. And I kind of 9 months in started to get sciatica, you know, was doing some treatment for it, but not really. And then I eventually spoke to a physio and they were like, yeah, you need to stop because it just started with the sciatica, the kind of the nerve tingling in my legs from the disc pressing on the nerve. But yeah, it just kind of eventually evolved into pain and stuff like that. And then had to take time off. And then from there, it was about 12 to 18 months of no rowing. But then there was some other stuff in there as well that I was definitely could have done a lot better to manage that injury.
Yeah. And as far as like the sciatica, like do you remember like the Were you getting like the shooting symptoms, or was it like pinpoint, just like in the glute, or just for the people who are listening right now, were you like, because I for some of my sciatica friends, they can row for a little bit and then it creeps up like part of the way through the training, like while they're out in the water, you give it like 15 or 20 minutes and then there's the numbness, the shooting down the legs, the those types of things. So what type of symptoms were you experiencing with the sciatica?
Yeah, I would say it was a like a kind of throbbiness in my heel. That's where I really noticed it. So not so much in the glute. That's kind of how that was the big kind of 80% of my symptom, I would say, is that kind of heel tingling kind of throbbiness sometimes. And then when it started getting bad, it would kind of like feel like a full nerve was kind of being hit all the way down my leg. Like that's when it was really bad actually. And it was like, when you just get hit your funny bone or something and the whole thing flares up. It's kind of like that all the way down my leg. So that wasn't nice, but that was mainly where I felt it. And I wouldn't really feel it was kind of more a constant thing. Like I wouldn't say I felt it when I was rowing. It was when I'd stopped rowing that I noticed it. So yeah, that's those are the specifics.
And so you took 12 to 18 months off?
Yeah, so I yeah, I haven't thought about this in a while, but yeah, this is a whole mindset thing for me as well. And I don't want to give the wrong message of like, oh, sometimes you can make it up in your head because obviously, so many people they need to hear the opposite of that. But for me, it was also kind of coupled with I made progress relatively quickly in the sport and I would put a lot of pressure on myself. And it was weird because sometimes I would almost see people pulling out of races and be jealous of them because I was putting so much pressure on myself. So I'm like, oh, they have a race, an excuse to not race. So for full honesty, like there was some of me that was kind of like happy in a way that I didn't have to do the training and I could just do the cross training and get into the system and build fitness on the bike. And yeah, I think a massive disclaimer that that's not a message I want to share with anybody who's listening who's probably struggling with an injury, but it was just one of the factors for me that I think stopped me from committing fully to training, but to recovery. But yeah, we started doing treatment, started doing massage, which I don't think worked that well. One thing I did start to do, which I knew was an issue, was my mobility. And I read this really good article from Alex Gregory when he got into the Beijing team. Oh no, after the Beijing team, he's a British double Olympic champion. And he talks about after Beijing, his weakness was his strength. So technically very, very good, but his erg was not good relatively. So he just dedicated 3 months where he was like, I'm not going to worry about rowing. All I'm going to focus on is my weakness. And for him, that was strength. So I just thought about it like, well, right now, what is my weakness? It's not getting fit on the bike or watching technical videos, it's my back. So I shifted my identity away from a rower into somebody who was I was like, my sport right now is back fixing. So that's kind of what I always say to people when our athletes, when they get injured, I'm like, you're not a rower anymore. You're a back fixer or you're an illness recovery or, like just get focused on what that priority should be. And yeah, that was the start. I basically just dedicated. If I was not walking, I was stretching. So like I would be making dinner, chopping onions, and I'd have my foot like kind of disgusting a little bit, but I'd have my foot up on the counter. I had a sock on. I never barefoot. Right, I'm gonna stop going into the detail there, but you get the idea. If I was watching movies, I was stretching. If I was brushing my teeth, literally, if I was not moving, I was if I was sat in lecture halls, in university, I was stretching and like being a pain for other people as well because I had to like sit up with like good posture as well. That was a big thing for me. I really had a big sort of like curve in my upper back and
Yeah.
then a opposite curve in my kind of like lower back. It was quite like a sort of S thing. So I really worked a lot to fix that. I remember, you know, my back muscles, upper back muscles were sore from having to fix my posture. So that was something as well. I just became very, very focused on that. And that did start to help, but at the same time I also took it as a time where I could be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go out and start partying all the time. And I was going out every weekend and definitely that was obviously bad for recovery, not sleeping well and, going out and drinking and all that played a definitely had a negative impact on how well I recovered. But again, that's kind of going a little into a little bit more of the mindset, not being fully committed, afraid to go back, the pressure and that sort of thing. And then yeah, the one big change for me was when I started to journal like what I was doing each day. And because I like this thing, like I was doing all this stuff, yeah, I wasn't feeling progress. I'd go on for months, 3, 6 months. In some cases, it was getting worse. I would keep, oh, back's a little bit better. Let's try 5 minutes on the rowing machine. Oh my God, agonizing pain afterwards. And then I'm watching all these rowers, people who I used to be faster than, doing all this training, getting faster than where I was, getting into the GB team, looking at them rowing as well. I'm looking at them row with these like bent backs. And I'm like, how are you rowing like that and not hurting yourself when I can't get on the machine with like perfect posture for 5 minutes and be pain free? So there was a real strong lack of, like yeah, despair and like lack of hope. I really just I was like had this deep belief that how in the hell am I so sorry for swearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. um how am I going to get back? How am I going to do the training required to do that? That's just what I couldn't help but think. I'm like, this little amount of load is creating me this amount of a problem, and it's been so long now. And yeah, I think anybody that's had one of these long injuries, that will know what that's like and know how lonely it can feel and know how hard it was. But I can't remember why, but I did just start to journal. I was like, right, I need to figure out what's causing this. So just started noting down, like, did I walk to university that day? Did I carry a backpack? How long was I sat in the lecture hall for? All these details and what my symptoms were that day. And I really was struggling because I wasn't seeing any progress. But then as soon as I started to do that, I'd have what I felt like was a bad day. And then I'd go back and look at my day the week before, and see, oh, like I did the exact same things this day and I didn't have sciatica while I was walking. So that
Mhm.
gave me a bit of confidence and a bit of hope as to how I can move forward. And I also then started to realize that it was back squats that were hurting my back. And I was speaking with the physio, they were watching me move, the weights coach, like I had great support around me. And
Yeah.
even then we still weren't able to figure it out. So there was only when I did that that I started to notice what was causing it. So we removed that, and then the back started to get better. So that was the kind of like start of the process of getting there. It's one thing I recommend I mean, just in general for training, I recommend in life. I think everybody should journal, and I do it. I do it all the time now. But I wish I journaled more when I was training. I wish I would have loved to have that documented. And I tried to find my injury journal, but I can't. It's probably in the bin somewhere. But yeah, that was the start of me starting to progress.
That's amazing. I love the tip of an injury journal, like being able to kind of like write it out. And especially if I find for a lot of my youth athletes, they just don't realize everything that they're doing all day and the things that may
Hmm.
be setting things off. And then they get on the erg and they try to erg and they can't. And
Yeah.
so, like, how did you start to step your erging back up? Like after you removed the back squatting, you realized what was causing the issues. Were you able to get enough relief so that the erging could slowly kind of come back? And was that the turnaround for you so you could actually tolerate being on the machine?
Yeah, I think what it was like the culmination of me getting to a point where I could start to erg again was journaling like crazy, like making sure that I was journaling everything, getting mobile. And again, this is something that people would say to me towards the end of my career. Oh my God, Jack, like your mobility is so good. I wish I could row like that. I wish I could have that length at the front. I'm like, I did so much work on that. Like that's what I try to remind people. Like, no, I was so immobile. So that was a big thing was stretching. But again, there's stuff that I think works so much better for that now. So you can like because it was like a long journey for me this back thing. So we can get to that maybe like later. But that was what got me there. Removing back squats and lots and lots and lots and lots of core work, getting my core very strong. Yeah, like when I continued to journal when I started bringing erging in, but for me, and this is different for everybody, but I did found like once I was at a point I could do one erg, like I could do, two. Like I found that there wasn't like a kind of so much a gradual build. It was more like a bit more binary, like I'm ready or I'm not ready. I wasn't doing. I was doing the high intensity on the erg, I think. I think I started to do that, which is kind of strange, I guess, but I think it was the longer, low intensity stuff, the volume that I think loaded me up a little bit more. So I was doing more of that on the bike. I wish I could tell you exactly what that split looked like as we built it back, but I mean, from what I remember before, like when we're doing this with athletes, we'll say we'll have always have at least a day in between the time that they do the erg. And then
Mhm.
so what we always say, a big objective for somebody is if you can get to the point where you're doing ergs on back-to-back days that are around 30 to 40 minutes, then you're in a really good spot. So that was, just gradually building up to that and being sensible and being okay with going slow was something that I think helped. But the interesting thing as well was I worked on my core so much and I hadn't been in the boat for like a year. My balance was better when I got back into the boat after like a year off. So there were some pros to it as well. And it reminded me of how much I wanted it. Like it reminded me seeing people rowing. I was like, damn, I really like can't wait to get back out there. Because there was a time I put so much pressure on myself. I didn't feel that way. So yeah, that's how it looked, but it wasn't a straight like once I was out of there, like that's almost the easier part. I think when you have that constant reminder of your back or your injury giving you problems because it's hey, do your mobility, do your core every day, do your mobility, and then it was kind of as I started to get better, I was like, oh, cool, right, I don't need to worry about that anymore. And then sure enough, crash back down. So that was another trial. Like for me, I wish it maybe wasn't this way. Maybe a limiting belief, but I feel I have to like screw up to actually like and have some consequences for something before I change behavior. Maybe that's not always true, but so it definitely helps me. So there was a few times when training was going well, back was good, no mobility, no core, no, and then crashing back down and get another flare up and have to come back to it. So it really did take a lot of time doing mobility core, even when it had been, months and months, and even towards the end of my career, years, without a flare up, to still know, no, like this is just not worth it, to keep going. That's what I think in some ways it's harder to motivate yourself when you don't have that constant reminder of the injury.
You're always those vitamin, I always call them the vitamin exercises, the exercises you just have to do because your body needs those particular
Mm.
activities in order to be primed to do the rowing. Like our bodies, everybody's body is different. So some people need some type of additional strengthening in order to tolerate the rowing stroke. So that's really amazing, like that you were able to put all this together. And so you get better. And then how long
Hmm.
was it before like trials and all those types of things that kind of like when did you feel well enough to go back into the prescribed training and start working towards your performance goals again?
Hmm. So it definitely wasn't like 100% by the time I was out and racing. And I also probably did have a bit of pressure from coaches and the support system that I was on, which is kind of fair enough. But yeah, I don't know. I was probably doing, I would say 80% of the sessions, 80% of the training volume that say somebody was in the regular squad. And yeah, I was doing about 80% of that and then just making up for the rest of it on the bike before I started doing training. But yeah, like once I said, like, once I was doing back-to-back ergs, like it really did kind of take off from there. And it was just a case of being sensible and, not helping your friend move their fridge, after a full training day, kind of stupid stuff like that. Or like I think most rowers are familiar with this in the off season just doing any activity that isn't the straight up and down linear motion of the rowing stroke. I injured my shoulder one off season doing an aggressive overhead return in badminton. So so I gave it everything I had, but I didn't have I think the skill to not hurt myself. But yeah, just trying to avoid silly stuff like that. And I did actually have to be pretty careful, even like moving couches just to be very conscious of the fact that it could hurt my back and it wouldn't feel like much in the moment, but that yeah, like I was very obsessed with like this, so I took it very seriously. It was my big, goal in my life was to do this. So I took all that stuff as much as I was being silly with some things. I was also being very serious with making sure I didn't leave any stone unturned.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, because a lot of times if you do get injured, you have to avoid those other things that could possibly set things off. Like I had an athlete who was a rower who had a meniscus repair, and she was feeling so good that, the winter, the powder came, and she went snowboarding with a friend, and I was like,
Oh,
I'm like,
oh
what are
no.
you doing? She's like, comes into PT, like, oh, my knee really hurts. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, what exercise did I give her? What did I prescribe her?
Yeah.
What was it? And then she's like, oh, I went snowboarding with a friend on Saturday. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, no.
Yeah.
I know you
It's
wanted to go
hard.
fun, and it's tough, especially if an athlete is younger and they're feeling better, so they want to like be a regular person, and like when your friends ask you to go snowboarding, you want to be able to go, but you have to kind of balance it out that Monday morning's going to come along, you're not going to feel ready to erg, and you're going to feel terrible again, and you'll be running and coming and seeing me. So
Yeah. And that's the
it's
thing, like it was stuff like that over time that made me slowly realize, okay, and especially again with the journaling, like you just it becomes very clear, like, like how much do I want to prioritize this? Like how much do I care about getting my back in good condition so that I can achieve like my lifetime goal? And for me, that that goal was big motivation for me. So it became I like throwing myself into the process as well and becoming obsessed with something. So I liked that whole process of, nailing sleep and making sure, I'm eating good, nutritious food and I'm hydrating and, doing everything I can to maximize it. So for me, that was maybe a little bit easier, but I can totally understand that some people it's, you've had that, yeah, that skiing holiday booked in for a while and it's maybe a bit touch and go, but that's life, I guess.
Yeah. And as you were rehabbing, were there any other athletes who were also injured who were like your rehab buddies or anyone on the team who was kind of helping you out to kind of get through the whole process?
Well, not to go back to my old coach, but he had 100% chronic injury rate. So yeah, we had lots of company in the rehab room, but yeah. So yeah, we had lots of company. Yeah, like yes, to answer your question, but then there was that group, and then I had basically gotten to this support group that was kind of like the Scottish rowing performance group, and I was the only person in that. So I did have separation, and my injury was a lot worse than a lot of the people in our group as well. So yeah, it was very lonely. I'd say I didn't know anybody that was injured as long as I was. So it was tough. I didn't feel like there was anybody really kind of going on the same journey. So nah, it wasn't, and maybe that's why I started spending more time with like my friends from school, going out, drinking, that sort of thing. Maybe that's a good point I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, I always wonder about like the resources and how, and we kind of talked about that earlier about you lose your team, you lose your routine, you're not
Yeah.
feeling well. Like how do you mentally piece all that together? And I think, falling back on your friends who weren't rowing and doing something that you could still do, which was going out and having a good time, and then trying to, are you self-soothing? Are you trying to like a lot of times on rowing teams, we don't have these spaces where we can address these mental kind of,
Yeah.
because it's one of these sports, it's all or nothing. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't want to be out there and be the person who's like, hey, coach,
Mm.
you gotta take me out. I can't finish this. So there's athletes out there that just get in the boat and they make it happen because if they don't, they can't be with their teammates. They can't stay in their normal schedule. They're gonna get bumped to some type of injury program,
Yeah.
and potentially not be able to even have an opportunity to get into a boat. I
That's
think
very
that's the
true.
hard thing about our sport is that sometimes it encourages the silence about an
Yeah.
injury. And I mean, did you find that like or was it more in the beginning or?
Yeah. Honestly, because I was in the single, I didn't
Mhm.
have that pressure, and I was also in the talent group, talent ID group that I was in. I was the only man there as well. It was like me and then nine other women. So I was, I didn't have like a doubles partner or anything like that I was going out and training with. So I didn't really. I was just thinking that as you're saying that, I was like, I didn't feel that at all, honestly. because it
Yeah.
was very easy for me in the single to just go, no, no, I need to go in. So maybe if I did that, that would have felt like more of a problem. But yeah, I mean, just being in the GB team around the scullers versus, the sweepers. Obviously, sweep causes more injuries, but I did see more of the sweepers who were like putting up with injuries and just no, I'll find a way to figure it out. Whereas in the sculling team, it was much more like, oh, I'm ruined. Okay, I'm gonna stop here, wait until it gets fully fixed and come back in. But yeah, it's interesting you're talking about the social side of it and the stress relief, and then, finding going out as an alternative. I'm not trying to plug my podcast here, but
No,
we I
please
just
don't.
yeah, we just posted an episode with Dr. Ellen McLaughlin, and she specializes in stress within sports psychology,
Yeah.
and she talks about how sometimes if you are stressed outside of sport, that you can look to sport for that outlet, and it can actually make you better at the sport because you lean into it more. You find your social group there. Maybe something's going on at home or whatever. But it's amplified when you have something like an injury in that sport because then, if you got into rowing not as like a kind of stress escape, but just because you kind of liked it, and then you got
Mhm.
injured, it's not so much of an issue as whereas if you're someone who's rowing is your escape and it's the thing that helps your mental health or whatever, and then you have something like an injury, it acts as like a double whammy. So yeah, it can have a really big impact is the point she was making. But it definitely wasn't, maybe not for those same reasons you were listing, but it definitely was mentally just so discouraging. But I mean, like looking back on my rowing journey now, like that's the one point I always talk about is I got into the GB team pretty late. Like I was 27, so very late for when most people get in at like 22 or whatever.
Mhm.
I was so close to quitting before I got in because I hadn't been, it didn't seem like I was going to get invited. So I was like, right, for about 3 or 4 months, I was like, probably going to quit, probably going to quit. And eventually I did get invited. And then I got all these congratulations from people. And I was like, if I had quit 3 months earlier, I wouldn't have gotten all these congratulations from people. And it made me realize then that what I was most proud of was the stuff that people wouldn't be able to understand. And a big part of that was the injury that I went through. And, that's why I think this podcast is so cool because you can share your story with people and help people maybe relate in the way that it's hard to for people who haven't gone through it. So, it's maybe something I would say as well is like going through these injuries is just something like you can learn so much about yourself. I think you become so much more aware of your body. You become really, really good at listening to your body, which is again cool. Rowing is a sport that already does that. You learn, you can come out the other side and build kind of very good confidence in your ability to go through some of these challenges. So yeah, it's tough though. It's tough. And anybody listening that's struggling with an injury right now, I genuinely like feel for you and I know how hard it is. And just stay consistent, stay sensible, focus on your processes, listen to good physios, listen to your physio like Adrian or whoever, and it can get better.
As far as, okay, so injury gets about, you said about 80%. You go
Uh-huh.
on to trials, and when you, because that particular, like, the was that trial the one where you didn't you win your trials, that particular, was it right after that, like where you hit that peak,
No, it
or
was
did it
the
take a
opposite
little?
of that. It was
It
the
was the
opposite
opposite.
of
Okay.
that. I very much didn't win the trials.
Oh,
I was basically last place. I was 2 minutes over. So basically a 20-minute race. I was 2 minutes off of where I wanted to be. I was massively, massively, massively behind the standard, and yeah, yeah, it's this going into a bit more the kind of performance like training technique side of it, but like my 2K at that point was maybe like a 6:02 or a 6:04, and when I won trials, which was 2 minutes faster than that time I did, I was around a 5:54, so I was only 10 seconds faster over 2K. So, it wasn't so much the fitness I think that maybe gave me those changes. It was the technique and the mindset and the preparation that I had going into that one where I did win. But
Mhm.
yeah, that was the first one. I don't know, maybe just like forgot how to push myself when I was racing in the boat. I think I was still quite apprehensive to do that. I was training so inconsistently. And like after the injury was when I was really just up and down, lying to myself all the time, making up all these excuses. And again, disclaimer, don't like, if you're got an injury right now, like please don't look into that too much and think, oh, am I lying to myself? Like for me, it was a whole nother mental thing. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was kind of why I was going relatively slow compared to like where I wanted to be. But yeah, I mean, it took, so that was like 2015. When was it? 20 February 2014. I did those trials, miles off of the back. November 2014, did trials again, a little bit quicker, but still miles off the back. February 2015, that was my worst performance ever. I literally, I'm pretty sure I got slower in that time, just trading so inconsistently and lying to myself and saying, oh, it's just my back. If once my back's sorted, then I'll be able to get in. I have all this potential. And then, yeah, I worked with a new coach and I don't know, I'm a little bit apprehensive to give this advice because I think for me, I did mentally get to a point where I was just so aware of my injury and I was any little like thing, I think if you think about like feeling I do this with like meditation now where I just, focus my attention on my feet. You can make up that you have sciatica in your feet in a way. And I think that was the problem for me. I still thought I did, and maybe I wanted to have that excuse not to fully commit. But
Mhm.
I had graduated by this point and I hadn't been getting the results that I wanted. And I was very, very lucky that a friend connected me with a volunteer coach in Glasgow, Ricky Walsh, and who had coached, some Olympians like Gillian Lindsay, based from Glasgow, whose first silver medal for GB women in Sydney, I believe. But yeah, maniac coach, just proper old school, like, pull as hard as you can. All the stuff that I'm against now. Sorry, Ricky, if you're listening, he's probably not listening. Um, he's old school, like he doesn't have any of that social media stuff or anything.
Mhm.
But yeah, he just basically toughened me up and he was like, I started that training with him and I said to him at the start, I was like, Ricky, I want to get into the Olympics. And he's like, cool, here's the plan. So I started doing the plan 4 weeks in. I started making up my own same old excuses. Oh, Ricky, my back's a little bit touch and go. I maybe should back off here. Oh, I don't know. And he pretty quickly after that, not that session, but a couple of those sessions, sat me down and he was just like, look, Jack, you said you wanted these goals. This is the training you're doing. This is the training you need to be doing. It's not aligned. That's fine. And he wasn't telling me off. He was just genuinely like, that's fine. We just need to change your goals. And I was like, no, I don't want to change my goals. And when he did that, he put the onus on me to take responsibility for the training. It's like, here's the training. If you want, everybody wants the goal, but not everybody wants to do the training. And when I did that, I think he kind of gave me that encouragement to just go for it. And he didn't directly say like, Jack, you need to push through and you need to take a risk here. You need to jump fully into training. But um, his training was crazy. The toughest to this day, the hardest training I'd ever done in my life. We'd have these builds of 4 week blocks, and at the end of the 4 week block, you're building volume, and the Saturday and the Sunday would be, essentially each day would be um like 40K each day, and 20K of each of those days would be like intensity. So you do like 2K up, 2K light up, 2K hard down, like just crazy, crazy training. And yeah, I mean, I started it and I was absolutely fine. My back did not give me an issue and went to the trial and like massively jumped up the rankings because I just,
Wow.
yeah. So that was my back injury. And that, I was still, making sure I was stretching. I was still doing all the good stuff. But yeah, that's kind of a big, big leap forward for me. And from that point, after I started working with Ricky, yeah, I still had a couple tweaks here and there. Had to take, jump on the bike for a week, that sort of thing. I had a shoulder injury as well, a nerve impingement after COVID because I'd been cycling, and then I jumped straight into rowing volume with no transition and just was doing chin ups, and then it just kind of went.
Oh.
Yeah. That was I still feel that one actually to this day. The nerve impingement is like
Yeah.
it's still kind of inflamed. I have to be careful with it, but the back had never been better. And then yeah.
Yeah, there's so much like vascular nerve through the shoulders and then with rowing on top of it, it tightening it, and then the cycling tightening it, and then giving it that chin up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
especially when I was cycling, like me being me, like I just got obsessed with cycling and I was doing all the like aero poses, you know, that you see the like and like there's no need for a rower to be doing this, but I just liked throwing myself into the sport. I was doing all the like shrugging your shoulders and like trying to get my Strava time like 0.3 kilometers per hour faster, just silliness. But yeah, so that didn't help. But that was less so of an issue. That was relatively decently, but I did crazy mileage on the bike to make up for that one. I was doing like 3 or 4 hours on the bike a day to try and keep up with the training volume, but that was probably a little bit overkill, but it made me feel better about myself missing training.
As far as if there's athletes out there right now that are working towards that elite level who have an injury, what's the biggest advice that you would give to them?
So the big thing is figuring out like what you need to do to support it and fix it. Giving yourself time to fix it and no absolute non-negotiable, like building that into your daily routine, your pre-training routine. Yeah, it's cold. There's nowhere to sit on the floor to do your rolling, tough shit. Like, sorry for swearing. Tough. Yeah. Like just do like you got to build it in. And if you don't, like you're gonna have issues again. Another big thing is you have to be your own biggest advocate. You have to take the lead with what's going on in your body. You know when it's right. You might not know when it's right or wrong, but you know what you're feeling. So I think even if you just start to communicate that, but even to a certain extent, you can communicate it with the physio, you can communicate it with a coach, but you're gonna have to learn like what's this point at which you need to stop and when it's okay to push on a little bit as well. And I mean, look, for the elite level, elite sport is not healthy. The amount of training I was doing, my energy was just constantly dropped. There's a lot of signs in my body that I was not in a healthy position. Um, and with that, I think same with injuries, you're putting your body through an unsafe amount of load. So niggles, tweaks, that sort of thing are the reality of it. You need to learn how to deal with it, and you're gonna need to slowly figure out. I think if you're amateur rower training 4 to 5 times a week, don't listen to this, but you will have to learn at some point how to when it's okay to keep going. I think so long as you're getting seen to by physio, by a coach. I feel like that's the obvious one as well. Like go and see a physio, go and see a specialist. I feel
Yeah.
like that's obviously a given. But yeah, and then the big thing for me in my last year as well was we worked with this really good physio who was so good actually. Like they had this massive decrease in injury rate in the GB team. And he talked a lot about just like activating muscles and making
Mhm.
sure you get your muscle warm and get it switched on. The big thing for me that really helped was activating my hip flexors, adductors, abductors, and a little bit of my glutes before I would go rowing. So just doing a couple sets on exercises of each of those. And I did the most amount of volume I ever did in my rowing career. I actually did the least amount of stretching I probably ever did, and I did the most amount of that activation work and had the lowest injury rate. And I actually, you know, kind of go a nice full circle here. When I was in the GB team, I was the most consistent trainer as well. Like I missed the least amount of sessions. Um, so, going from someone who could barely sit on an erg for 4 minutes once every month to that, doing 150, 200K a week, like, I think it's a testament to the fact you can do it. So, um, that would be my advice to anybody. I think, yeah, anybody who's not trying to get to an elite level, just ignore that, take that stuff, and then ignore the stuff I said about learning how to push through injuries. But yeah,
Yeah, I think consistency is one of those things that across the board, everyone has to kind of work on because when you have that injury, you have to give your body that input. You have to be working, like you said, on your mobility. You have to be working
Mhm.
on the weaknesses. You have to be building all those little building blocks so that you can have a full wall that you're working with instead of all the little holes that resulted in the actual injury too. So,
Mhm.
but I wanted to ask you about edge rowing. Tell us about edge rowing and how you transitioned from being an elite rower to doing edge rowing.
Mm. So pretty much from the day I started rowing, I started coaching. So I started rowing in 2012. I pretty end of 2012. Pretty soon after that, I was coaching school kids. I remember I had been doing random jobs like manual labor and working in KFC. Lasted 3 shifts. Oh, no, I think I lasted 2 shifts there before I just, yeah. Anyways, wasn't for me. And I remember the first day I got like paid for coaching. I was like, are you kidding me for this? Like, this is the ticket. And yeah, since that point, I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach, but I knew I wanted to be involved in sport in one way or another. And yeah, throughout my whole rowing career, just like I was sharing my experience as a rower with, the people I was coaching. And then when I moved down to Caversham to the GB team, you get, in the UK, you get pretty good lottery funding, you get decent support. It's basically just enough to break even. The starter rate for me was not, so I had to look to other ways to find income. And I couldn't do the coaching in the same way I was before. And I saw other people doing online coaching, and I was like, well, if they can do it, I can definitely do it and do it better. And yeah, I was just started up it's actually just coming up for Edge Rowing's 5th birthday. Um,
Oh, congrats.
and yeah, I started that was in the GB team, and then long story, and a whole nother story, left the GB team, and I with that had time to go into I was recovering from glandular fever basically. And
Oh,
with that, I had no time to train. I wasn't training, so just kind of started to build edge rowing, and yeah, I just haven't looked back. It's the best job in the world. You know, we get to work with, athletes from around the world. We've got our awesome community of people that we get to help, people that are, the same passion level, the same interests. I remember when I was in the GB team, my coach said to me, or no, this mentor said to me, take it in because you're never going to be around a group of people that are so like passionate, obsessed about like one thing. And with edge rowing, the people that we work with, and then because we can be selective with who we want to work with in terms of our athletes and obviously our coaches.
yeah.
It's just an awesome group of people who just love the sport. And um yeah, it's just so fun, and getting to share all this stuff, like, some of the injury stuff, which is I think is awesome that you're doing this as well, Adrian. But like where we like the kind of mindset, the training, the technical side of it. And yeah, just getting to be rowing nerds all the time and help. Yeah, but specifically, we work with busy professionals over the age of 40. So people, that's why I keep going back to the thinking about the amateurs, maybe listening, training 4 to 6 times a week. Um, and yeah, we're basically trying all the lessons that we learned as elite rowers in our coaching team, condensing that into the kind of training window that somebody has so that they can make sure that their training time is, maximized for every ounce of potential that they have. So that's what's fun for us. And it's yeah, it's just the dream job, and we're growing, like just nice and steadily growing and expanding our team. And we're going into more training camps, and we're arranging this year. We've got our first edge rowing cruise of people from around the world who are meeting up at Brit Masters and World Masters this year. So that's exciting. We're currently going through the headache of getting a club, an online club registered as an actual club. So
Oh,
but yeah, it's good problems to have. So that's where we're at right now. And yeah, we're limited on how many people can work with one to one. So we spend a lot of time putting out good content that's hopefully useful for people as well. So yeah.
I love your content. I was geeking out the other day just looking at some of the different things that you put out there, and I love it. So continue to put out all that information because I love seeing it. And I meant to ask, like, what's the number one thing that people are doing wrong that you want them to stop doing wrong in rowing to improve their rowing?
Well, for me, it's got to be, I mean, there's so many things, but the big one is mindset. And to put that simply, they're not training their mindset in the same way they train their technique or their body. People, you know, yeah, that's definitely it. You know, you go and you like look at the Olympic A final, and you'll have the Italians who never rate below 24 in training, the
Mhm.
GB or UT2 in weights, all the different training programs, different techniques. But what they all have in common is their mindset and their ability to handle distractions, handle pressure, handle anxiety, and reshift that attention onto what's important and what they can control. And that's the key to performance. And that's a big thing about handling injury. Like a lot of that comes down to mindset as well. Massively comes down to mindset. So um, that's the big mistake. And then, I'll put a question box out on Instagram and say, like, ask me anything you want. And 95% of the questions are, what's the best 2K prep? Like, what lift should I be doing in the gym? And yeah, of course, that stuff matters. But the most important thing should be mindset. And you should be thinking about, um, how am I speaking towards myself? How do I handle distractions when they come in and throw me off? Am I pushing myself? Is there anything I can do to reach new limits in terms of how hard I can work? What sort of limiting beliefs do I have around myself? How am I training my brain? Am I seeing opportunities where there's distractions and where there's pressure as an opportunity to get better at dealing with it? Or am I hiding away from it and treating it like something you need to remove? So, um, short answer is people should train their mindset more, and that's hard because it's hard to measure mindset, like what is that. So that's a big part of like what we do with content as well, and when we're coaching as well, step by step processes for exactly how you can do that. And yeah, we put that through in our content a little bit as well.
It's amazing. I love the fact that like mindset's the number one thing because I know, like you said, if you ask the question, you're gonna get a bunch of like, what's my 2K prep? What's
Yeah.
the best stat? And a lot of times athletes, especially masters athletes, need to figure out like, am I being consistent enough? Am
Hmm.
I, and then when I have time, am I sticking to my workouts? Am I cutting them
Yeah.
short? Am I making an excuse why I can't get
Yeah.
this done? And then wanting the 2K prep and wanting all those other things without necessarily having that base of being able to meet the program where it starts because the mental mindset portion of it has not been addressed yet. So I love that. I love that
Yeah.
that's kind of like one of the first things that you're thinking about, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's like, you know it's external change versus internal change, and everybody's so much more comfortable with, oh, I just need a different set of blades, or I need to do 5 by 500 instead of six. But instead, like, mindset is real internal change about your beliefs, and that's hard. We're afraid to do that as humans, I think, without getting too philosophical. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because that's where there's the room for true personal growth. That's where you can get better as a rower, but then that becomes a vehicle to develop yourself personally. In the same way we're just talking about an injury. Yeah, obviously you don't want one, but if you can go through an injury, it really does change the way you're able to view yourself and how you can handle challenges. And uh, you know, again, going to you ask, you know, any like famous athlete, the top athletes in any sport, it's never going to be, like, this is how you return a tennis serve, or this is how you need to hold the ball in basketball. It's like it's gonna be mindset advice. It's gonna be about your attitude, and people again just don't want to hear it. So it's changing though, and there's a lot of I do think people are very open to it, and you're hearing more about mindset coaching and stuff like that. So it's cool to see, and yeah, very 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 passionate about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if you had to give one mindset hack, what's your favorite mindset hack to use? Like
Hmm.
favorite hack for maybe
Yeah,
consistency.
yeah, consistency, or or even just yeah. I think a big thing is when your mind has a, like, quote, negative reaction, or you're having an unhelpful thought, like you're doubting yourself, or you're thinking about how you're not going to PB on your 2K, or you're thinking about how that crew just took a length off of you at the start. not trying to immediate don't view that as like, oh my God, that's me gone now. I'm gonna spiral. I'm gonna go into negativity and oh, there's no way out of that. That's a very, very normal reaction. And elite athletes will have that same reaction. Like that's the primitive part of our brain. It's just so normal, and there's just nothing that you can do about that. You can't control your first thought, but you can control your second thought, and you can control what you do after you have that. So it's like saying, don't think about a purple elephant. You're gonna think about a purple elephant. So it's what do you think about after that? So then it's becoming learning how to just recognize when you're having when that happened. If you can just like a simple first step is to become more observant of your thoughts, and instead of being like, I am stressed, say, I notice that I'm feeling stressed. And there's a whole process that you want to run through after that. But if I was to just give one simple advice, it was to be, recognize when that's happening and accept that that's okay. That's a normal thing for our brains to do. Um, and that I think the problem a lot of people will make is the mistake a lot of people will make is they think this is a perfect mindset, never being distracted, totally militant, like just the blinders are on, and they're here and they try and make that jump in one go. And we would never say, hey, you're gonna fix your herniated disc in one session with me, or
Yeah.
you're gonna take 50 seconds off your 2K in this one 2K prep. We know that because it's quantifiable and we can measure it. But with mindset, that's another mistake people make because they try and go from wherever they are now to like quote perfect mindset in one jump. So you need to take time and be patient with it. So I feel like sorry, that was kind of like two tips there, but
Oh, no, I love
yeah,
that. I love that.
yeah.
So where can people find you? And I know you were talking a little bit about a meetup you were doing. Any other big things that are happening with edge rowing?
Yep. So Jack Burns dot edge rowing on Instagram. We're also on YouTube. If you type in Jack Burns Edge Rowing, it'll come up there. There's the Edge Rowing podcast as well, which we have as well. And then we also have yeah, for the events that we're doing. So training camps, we do keep them a bit internal to our athletes. If we have space for them, we will open up, but not very much. But we're planning to open up more of them. So there might be space for those. Depending on when this gets posted as well, our books are shut, but we will be opening probably in 6-ish weeks. So what would that be? I should know this. May-ish,
May.
May-ish time of 2020, 2026. And then we'll shut again. And then, yeah, well, I'm hoping to go to more bases as well this year. So I'll be at Brit Masters and then I'll be at Head of the Charles. I'll be at World Masters as well. So if you see me there, you want to say hi, please do.
Maybe Head of the Charles, because I'm in New York, so Head of the Charles is like a 6, 8 hour ride, and a lot of our local teams go out there. So fingers crossed. I have
Yes,
4 kids,
definitely.
so sometimes somebody has a track meet
Mm,
my kids run cross country in the fall. So
okay.
cross country is notorious for being on a Saturday, and especially like mid-October, forget it.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm keeping fingers crossed that nobody has a race that day, so I can sneak out, go to Boston for a couple days and see everybody because it's like rowing Christmas. It's like
It
everybody's
is.
here and it's like a big old family get together and so I love going out to Head of the Charles. So I'll look for you there.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We definitely need to link up.
That'd be so cool. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Well, Jack, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really, really appreciate it. And if you've got any other friends who want to talk about
I know
their
a lot of
injuries
injured
or their
people.
current, yeah, their
Unfortunately. I'll contact my old
injuries.
coach, get him to say, hey, who's got all your old athletes you used to work with? You'll have plenty of guests.
Oh my goodness. But I just think it's really great to be able to get like this information out and give people just the space to think about like this person went through this injury and they went on to still fulfill their dream and that's something that can happen for them too. So
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
100%. Stick at it, and believe in yourself.